Good afternoon. I'm Mark Barrow, a neurosurgeon by training, and I work for the Focused Ultrasound Foundation, and we'll be speaking to you today about the role of professional societies in technology commercialization. In general, for a procedure to be used clinically and achieve success in the marketplace, it must have four things: regulatory authorization, a reimbursement code associated with it, a payment assigned to that code, and coverage for the code from insurance payers. Codes consist of two different types, basically: a C code granted by CMS and a CPT code granted by the American Medical Association, or AMA. Each of these requires meeting certain levels of clinical evidence for them to get issued. Payment is assigned by CMS and/or AMA based upon real-world usage and cost data derived from facilities that are actually doing the procedures. Coverage decisions are made by CMS for Medicare patients, as well as commercial payers and health plans. It should be noted that coverage also requires clinical evidence demonstration, and usually a much higher level of evidence than does granting a code. Professional societies have little, if any, role in the issuance of a C code. C codes are issued by CMS where there is not a CPT code issued yet, and they do not and are not involved at all in determining the payment level associated with the C code. That payment level is based solely on real-world usage. Professional societies do weigh in with the AMA on CPT code requests, and frankly, without professional society support, it is highly unlikely that one would be able to obtain a CPT code. Published clinical guidelines are used by most payers when making coverage determinations, and we will spend a lot of time talking about these clinical guidelines. Different committees are involved within the AMA in code requests and establishing guidelines. And as mentioned previously, a different level of evidence is required for a code or for a clinical guideline. For a code, the AMA issues CPT codes, and they require 5 articles, a minimum of 2 articles with no overlapping patients, at least one of which is no lower than level 2A. These criteria have changed recently, allowing international data, whereas previously it required US data only. The AMA looks to the code's professional society for the support and issuance of a code. CMS, on the other hand, uses best available clinical information to support the need for a code. That clinical information usually being provided by manufacturers who are requesting the C code. Greater weight is given to more methodologically rigorous and scientifically reliable evidence, and sufficient marketing activity evidenced by at least 3 months in the market is required, so a new or modified code can be shown to enhance the efficiency of the system, justify administrative overhead, and provide some kind of cost data to establish payment. Coverage is at the discretion of each payer. As we all know, payers include CMS, commercial insurers like Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, Cigna, etc., and managed healthcare providers like Kaiser and the Mayo Clinic. Although a specific service may be listed as a benefit by a payer, it usually is not covered unless it is determined to be medically necessary to prevent, diagnose, or treat illness, disease, injury, or some other condition. There are variations in coverage policies, even among payers and within different regional players within a specific coverage group. For instance, there are 12 Medicare regional contractors called MACs, and each one is responsible for coverage determination within their own designated region, unless CMS has made a national coverage decision, which it usually does not. There are also 36 independent and locally operated Blue Cross Blue Shield companies, and each defines their own coverage policies. Regardless, almost every single payer asks the same basic question when determining whether a given procedure will be covered at the payment level assigned by the AMA or by CMS. The question is Is the procedure reasonable and necessary? Although a specific service may be listed as a benefit by a payer and therefore considered reasonable, it in fact is not covered unless it is determined to be reasonable and medically necessary to prevent, diagnose, or treat an illness, disease, or condition. Usually, insurers have no contractual obligation to provide reimbursement when the procedure has not been proven to confer benefit as determined by the insurer itself. Unfortunately, there is no uniform definition of medically necessary. Post-World War II, medically necessary was interpreted to mean whatever the doctor felt was medically necessary. But that's been supplanted by a general consensus that only interventions of demonstrated effectiveness at a national or global level can truly be considered necessary. So determining whether an intervention has proven effective for a specific clinical use is now the key to coverage determinations. The central task of evidence-based medicine is to promote the adoption of medical practices whose effectiveness has been demonstrated in a convincing body of well-designed studies. There are a number of formal rating systems out there, but their value and use is questionable. For the most part, the basic principle of evidence-based coverage policy is comprehensive assessment of evidence of the effectiveness of the procedure. Is there a standard that needs to be met? It varies. For instance, one could look at this as presumption of coverage. That is, coverage is an intervention is covered unless there's compelling evidence that it's more harmful than beneficial. Then there's best guess coverage, where if the preponderance of evidence, whether it's extensive or meager or just an expert opinion, suggests that the technology is beneficial. That is, if only one person has weighed in and that one person says it's good, then it's covered. And then there's the burden of proof, which is justification that the value of a new intervention is not considered efficacious without adequate evidence to demonstrate efficacy. Most professional societies have adopted evidence-based approaches to developing practice guidelines, as have organizations such as the NCCN, the National Comprehensive Cancer Network. Within the focused ultrasound arena, the ACP, the American Society for Internal Medicine, the American Urologic Association, and the International Society for Stereotactic Radiosurgery have issued clinical guidelines. Guidelines in general require 1A evidence, which is evidence obtained from a systematic review of randomized controlled trials, or 1B evidence, which is obtained from a single individual randomized trial. If such does not exist, professional societies may use an expert opinion instead. While the inclusion of a procedure in a guideline does not ensure coverage by a payer, lack of inclusion in a published guideline can provide the payer with the cover necessary to deny coverage. And this must be kept in mind as one is planning and mapping out a strategy moving forward to get a specific procedure covered. The NCCN is a not-for-profit alliance of 30 leading cancer centers dedicated to improving cancer care. Their recommendations are derived from a clinical evaluation of evidence integrated with clinical experience and the consensus of a multidisciplinary panel. Interestingly, CMS officially recognizes from the NCCN their drugs and biologics compendium and have deemed it a mandatory reference for evidence of coverage policy and coverage decisions. This does not apply currently to medical devices, but it is not out of the realm of expectation that it might at some point in the future. What I'd like to do is walk through coverage decision processes for several commercial payers so that we can understand some of the things that are common to all of them. Humana has something called the Development of Coverage Policy Program, and it begins with a clinical researcher conducting extensive medical literature review, including, as noted here in red, specialty organizations' opinions and treatment guidelines. A coverage policy is created based on analysis of the research available, which is then presented to their technology assessment forum for acceptance or modification. This forum is composed of medical directors, practicing physicians, representatives from legal, claims, etc., and they come together to accept or deny the TAF, which becomes the coverage policy for Humana. Aetna has a similar process, and again, as you can see here, their medical clinical policy bulletins are based on guidelines from national recognized healthcare providers. Blue Cross Blue Shield has something similar, using criteria developed by specialized professional societies, as does United Healthcare, which they call General Accepted Standards of Medical Practice. Cigna uses physician specialty society recommendations as well to determine accepted standards of medical practice. The common thread through each of these, as I tried to make apparent, is the importance of professional and/or specialty society opinions and treatment guidelines. And it should be noted that these clinical evaluations on the part of the healthcare payers is extremely extensive. It's a exercise that each of you should undertake to look at your specific area of expertise and interest within one of these commercial payers and review their clinical assessment of your field. It is really eye-opening the amount of work that they go through to fully evaluate the literature in most instances. But I want to use a case study to show how these professional guidelines are used to determine coverage decisions within focused ultrasound arena. And I'm going to talk about primary prostate cancer. Transrectal outpatient procedures have been performed since late 1990s. More than 80,000 men have been treated worldwide. Technology is authorized for sale as of 2015 and is available at anywhere from 60 to 100 locations in the United States. And as you can see from this table, disease control with HIFU is equivalent, if not arguably better, than radical prostatectomy or radiation therapy, and certainly vastly superior to active surveillance. But the side effect profile is significantly improved. If you simply look at the incontinence level, with radical prostatectomy, 44% of men require pads on a daily basis. With HIFU, it's 2%. Erectile function is present in 85% of men who receive a focal treatment, as opposed to 30% of men with radical prostatectomy. So it's clear, at least in most people's minds who practice this treatment, that HIFU is a preferred intervention for localized prostate cancer. The American Urologic Association, as a professional society, supported a CPT code request from the vendors in this space and participated in presenting to the AUA panel. However, guidelines issued by the AUA, which is a separate organization within the AUA, determined that these interventions are not standard of care options because comparative outcome evidence is lacking, meaning there is no 1A or 1B data demonstrating in a controlled, randomized fashion that HIFU is equivalent to radical prostatectomy. I should point out that there was never a randomized controlled trial showing the value of radical prostatectomy in the treatment of prostate cancer. And the National Cancer Institute has also determined that most doctors in the United States do not consider HIFU to be a proven first-line treatment for prostate cancer. Therefore, when we get to coverage decisions, well-marked Blue Cross Blue Shield, referencing the AUA guidelines, issued the following coverage determination: that there's a lack of consensus on objective response criteria, and determined that this treatment has not been proven in controlled clinical trials and is not covered. Cigna, following the same pattern, referencing professional society guidelines, determined that HIFU is considered experimental, investigational, or unproven for localized prostate cancer. Anthem, referencing professional society guidelines, determined that HIFU for prostate cancer is not medically necessary. Aetna, referencing societies guidelines, determined that HIFU is experimental and investigational because of insufficient evidence. Oh, as you can see, the lack of inclusion of HIFU for prostate cancer in clinical guidelines issued by the AUA resulted in negative coverage decisions from all of the private insurance payers. As a second case, we're going to look at focused ultrasound ablation for recurrent prostate cancer. Here, the picture is slightly different. The NCCN issued a recommendation that only cryosurgery, brachytherapy, and HIFU are indicated for recurrent prostate cancer without metastases after treatment with radiation therapy. Therefore, Cigna and Aetna, along with several of the MACs, determined that HIFU is medically necessary as a localized treatment for recurrent prostate cancer. Anthem, on the other hand, it does not cover this treatment. The NCCN also, National Government Services has determined, which is CMS, has also determined that whole gland HIFU is considered medically necessary as a treatment for recurrent prostate cancer based upon the NCCN guidelines. In summary, coding and coverage are critical to the success of any new technology. It is imperative that any organization developing new technology to be introduced into the clinical arena determine at the start of technology development whether the technology can use existing codes or whether the new technology will meet the criteria for coverage with those codes. If it will, then regulatory authorization is pretty much the criteria for determining your success in the marketplace. However, if a new code and/or coverage determinations are required, professional societies are critical to engage early in the process. They have significant influence on the issuance of a CPT code. Therefore, reaching out to them and gaining support of the appropriate committee is critical to a favorable outcome with the AMA. And they can be the determining factor in code coverage decisions through the guidelines they issue. Therefore, a strategy needs to be in place to provide the society with the level of evidence necessary to be included in those clinical guidelines, meaning that the course of clinical evaluation of the technology should be determined early on based upon where the technology stands from a code and coverage point of view, because implementing a controlled clinical trial early rather than late or not at all may in fact be the shortest path to gaining coverage, which we all appreciate is critical for the success of technology in the marketplace. Thank you very much. Happy Friday the 13th. I hope you enjoyed the symposium so far and hope you look forward to the rest of the symposium today. Thank you.